this is an important piece of it too. And I'm not going to say this doesn't happen in the United States, but we have a lot more strict rules on what you're at least supposed to be doing in an interrogation. So describe what the police were doing to you over those days.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's almost like my family, especially my aunt in Germany, had a feeling that something was off. It didn't make sense to my family that I was spending hours and hours and hours answering the same questions over and over again in the police office. My mom, of course, thought there's a killer on the loose in Perugia who almost killed my daughter. I want her to come home. My aunt in Germany is saying, I'm going to come down there and get you. You need to go talk to the embassy. You're clearly not safe. But of course, the police were telling me, no, Amanda, you're a very, very important witness in this case. You were the first person to arrive at home and discover the crime scene. You were the roommate who was closest to Meredith. You are too important to us and our investigation to leave. And I believed them. And so I believed them when, over the course of those interrogations, they told me that I didn't need a lawyer and that I was not a suspect and I didn't know, and they lied to me. They told me that they knew who the murderer was. They had tapped my phone and I had no idea. They went through my phone and found my text message exchange between myself and Patrick Lumumba, my boss. And they interpreted that message that I sent him, which was a poorly translated Italian phrase, ci vediamo più tardi. I intended to say, see you later, whenever. They interpreted that to mean, I'll see you later tonight, this night, the night that the crime happened. And they interpreted that to mean that I had met with my boss, Patrick Lumumba, and that he had murdered Meredith. They lied to me and told me that everything that I thought I remembered about that night was wrong, that Raffaele said that I had not spent the night with him, and that I was so traumatized by what I had witnessed Patrick do that I could no longer remember it. And they pushed me, slapped me, yelled at me, told me to remember the truth, remember what Patrick did to her. And very leading, suggestive, coercive techniques, like even just saying, well, did you hear Meredith scream? And I said, I don't know. And they say, well, of course you would hear Meredith scream. She's being murdered. And I said, okay, I guess I heard Meredith scream. Like, this was the conversation I was having. And this is what the police wrote up in their report and had me sign. And of course, this was without an interpreter. This was without a lawyer. And this
Were you doing this in Italian?
I was doing this in Italian. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm only now realizing this. I did read that they were sending in 2 different detectives or police officers pretty much every couple of hours so that they would be fresh and could keep coming at you. You got no breaks. You didn't get water. They kept you up overnight. This is how it's done. This is how false confessions are given. And when you see a false confession, I mean, it's like 9 times out of 10, it looks just like this. How does it happen? Just like this. You break down a person's willpower to the point where they'll say anything just to get out of the room, just for you to leave them alone.
And they'll believe anything. Like, I genuinely believed at a certain point that the only explanation for the police's behavior towards me was that I must have amnesia and I must have witnessed the murder. And It wasn't until they stopped screaming at me and stopped hitting me that I had a moment to take a breath, to regain a sense of composure and realize what had just happened. And I recanted immediately. But of course, at that point, the police had already gotten what they wanted, signed statements from me. And so they ignored me. They told me, don't worry about it. Your true memories will return. In the meantime, we're going to be taking you to a holding place for your own protection. Then you'll get to see your mom.
Why would they be so focused on getting you to point the finger at your boss from Le Chic, right? That was the restaurant.
That was the bar, yeah.
Why? Like, I could understand them trying to get you to say, I did it. But why were they so focused on you getting you to point the finger at him?
I don't think that they actually thought at the beginning that I did it. Especially we're looking at, a sexual assault murder. Mm-hmm. These are almost always committed by men. And I think that's something that is overlooked in this case, the way that it's been made so much of a like girl on girl sexualized fantasy crime. Like, when we're talking about the realities of violence against women, we're talking about male against female violence against women. And I think what they believed at the beginning was that I genuinely knew something because they misread my behavior. They inaccurately interpreted my behavior to mean that I was not surprised by Meredith's murder and that I knew something that I wasn't telling them. And so they pressured me into implicating someone because they believed that I knew who it was. And it was over the course of my interrogations that I think they settled upon Patrick, who they didn't know from Bob or John. Like, they had just seen a text message between me and a person named Patrick on my phone, in their mind, setting up an appointment. And they thought, this is it. This is the guy. Amanda let him in. Amanda knows what happened. We got to get her to admit it.
So did they arrest him right away?
They arrested him right away without checking his alibi, without doing anything, despite the fact that I recanted. And they kept him in prison for 2 weeks, even though numerous people came forward saying that they had been with him the entire night.
Wow. I mean, it just shows they had no appetite for the truth. And question about him before we move on from him, because I read that he recently said something like, why hasn't she ever apologized to me? Or this is not that recent. It was like 2011. There was a quote from him saying, she never reached out to me. Is that still true?
And no, and I did apologize to him in court. So I don't know what he means. I'm assuming that he's potentially talking about how his lawyer at a certain point reached out to me asking for money and wanting me to admit to this whole situation, his imprisonment being my fault. And my point was, this was not my fault. I was coerced into signing statements, and this is the police's fault.
I was going to say, they should sue someone, but it shouldn't be Amanda Knox.